I'm going to say Shavua Tov Gedvach to all of you who are listening to this. I am recording this right before Shabbos, so good Shabbos to me. Here we go. We are on 97b1, Tzadi Zayin Amud Beis, and 97b1, first column, second set of paragraphs. So Rav Shimon Omer Nos Non Lechaver. So Rav Shimon said that a person is allowed to pass tefillin from one to another. And this is better, right? In other words, a person finds tefillin in the public domain. So the Tanakama said that the best way to do this is to walk, stop, never walk more than 4 amos. Rav Shimon says no. Instead, what's better to do is I give them to you, then you give them back to me, or you give it to another person. We keep on passing it, so no one's ever doing an akira, a getting up and a stopping, because in order to be chayiv, in order to be liable, you have to both lift something up, walk 4 amos, and then put it down. So the Tanakama says that the best way to do this is to go ahead and walk 4 amos and stop, walk 4 amos and stop. Rav Shimon says the best way to do this is to pass things to a friend and then back again. So Mike Mithley, what are exactly the argument? One, the Tanakama says it's better to walk less than 4 amos at a time. Why? Because if a person gives, if I give the tefillin to you, then you give the tefillin to someone else, then Avshem Milsa Shabbos, it's very public and it becomes a big disrespect to Shabbos. In other words, yes, you're saving tefillin, but at the end of the day, everyone's watching this whole spectacle of me passing. It looks ridiculous and it's going to draw a lot of attention. It's going to be a zilzal, it's going to be a disgrace for Shabbos. So Mar Savar and Rav Shimon holds Nos Lechavero If it's better for me to give it to you and you to give it to the next person, as opposed to the walking less than 4 amos. Why? Because if you take the other opinion of walking less than 4 amos, it's possible that a person is not going to be so good at their measurements and they're actually going to walk more than 4 amos. Okay, says the Gemara further, v'chein beno. The Gemara says that also your child. Okay, so the Gemara says, beno my baya hasan. What are we talking about? Children, your son in the field? What's going on here? So as we spoke of this out right when we learned the Mishnah, we're talking about a case where the mother gave birth to the child in the field, and obviously we can't leave the child in the field, and that's therefore a case where we pass it one to another. So what does the end of the Mishnah mean? Even if they are 100, so what does that mean? Even though it's not good for the child to be passed from hand to hand, it's just not good for the child. Nonetheless, Rav Shimon's saying even in a situation where it's not so ideal for the child, it's still better to do it that way than going less than 4 amos, because again he's afraid the person is not going to measure properly. Okay, then the Mishnah continued by saying that a person allowed to give a barrel with water to his friend and his friend to his friend, even if the barrel, the Mishnah said, is beyond the person's tchum. So the Gemara asks, so again, Rabbi Yehuda is saying that if I have a barrel that I want to bring to somewhere else, I'm allowed to pass it to you, and then you pass it to me, and go, etc., etc. Fine, that part we could sort of understand because you're not walking more than 4 amos, but he says even beyond the tchum, how do you get past the tchum issue? At the end of the day, if the barrel starts outside the tchum, how am I allowed to catch it because I'm passing it one to another? Why am I allowed to take it more than tchum? So ask the Gemara, doesn't Rabbi Yehuda hold that both animals and utensils are like the feet of their owners, that it's not just me who's limited by tchum, this glass of water, which is mine, is also limited by tchum. So if a person goes ahead and takes this beyond the tchum, I have to make sure that this cup is, so if this cup is limited by my tchum and someone has a tchum going that way, they're not allowed to take this cup there because this cup is limited to me because I'm the owner. So Rav Shlakish says from Levi the elder, how many cases the person pours the water from barrel to barrel? We're not actually carrying the same barrel. So what does it help? So Yehuda, consistent with his opinion, to Amar Maim Im Hemamish, okay, so there's a Mishnah in Beitza which discusses a case of tchum where a person borrows water on Shabbos and they go on Yom Tov, and they make bread. So the question then is, how far is this bread allowed to go on Yom Tov? So the Tanakama says that the bread can only go within the tchum area of both the original owner and the person who lent the water and then made the bread, the one who borrowed the water made the bread, because they both own this water now, and therefore it's going to be limited. Rabbi Yehuda says no. At the end of the day, water does not have meaningful substance, and therefore we ignore the water. The water is not going to be a limitation when it comes to the tchum. That's what we're talking about over here. So basically we're saying the barrel itself is not traveling, but just like Yehuda said in this other case that the water doesn't have substance, so too over here, he says that as long as the barrel stays within the place, right, the cup stays, but the water is going to travel because water, based on this Mishnah in Beitza, he says doesn't have substance. Ask the Gemara, my lo tahalech lo zo. The Mishnah says this should not go. This is referring to a barrel. That's not the way to talk about the water. So the Gemara says, lo yahalech masha bezo yotzim ragli alim. This, the water that is in this, the barrel, should not go further than the feet of the owner. So again, fine. So when the Tanakama said that if you hear noise in the background, that's Erev Shabbos fireworks. It's a new minhag. Yes, that is genuinely Erev Shabbos fireworks. Okay, so the Gemara says, so again, the Chachamim disagreed with Rabbi Yehuda, says, no, you can't do this. But the way they speak, it sounds like they're referring to the barrel. So the Gemara is saying, no, they're saying the water that's in the barrel cannot go further than the feet of the owner. Okay, says the Gemara, when Rabbi Yehuda said this halacha of the water being insubstantial is when it's mixed into the dough. So therefore, if I look at bread, do I see water here? No. Look, we're all humans made up of like a very high percentage of water. Do I see water when I look at a person? No. At the end of the day, it's mixed in. So where the water is discernible, it's right over here. Does Rabbi Yehuda really say that the water is meaningless? Is that so? Hashta batli. So and further, the Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda himself says that when water is mixed into a pot of cooked food, then it doesn't become nullified. And he does hold the water is actually meaningful, and the water cannot be taken beyond the tchum. The time is talking on the Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mayim Melech B'Tel B'Isa. The water and salt become nullified in dough. Ve'im B'Tel Migdar are not nullified in a pot of cooked water. And he wrote because of the gravy. So Rabbi Yehuda only said his halacha of the water being insubstantial when it's mixed into bread. But in a case where it's in a pot, or it's certainly when it's in a cup, standing by itself, the water is limited by the owner. Thank you for your patience. Rava tries to give an answer. We're talking about a barrel that acquired Shabbos residence. We're talking about water that was drawn on Shabbos, and the person drawing it did not have in mind that they are going to acquire the water. And therefore, since the water, basically what happens like this, I go to a well and I pull up the water, but I don't plan on keeping it. I want to give it to someone else. So I have no intention of keeping the water. The barrel, this barrel is mine. But the idea is that the water, which isn't limited by tchum, is actually the barrel, i.e. the cup, is actually going to be batal, is nullified vis-a-vis the water. And since the water is not limited by tchum, the barrel is also not going to be. We'll see a application list, and I think it'll become more clear. 97b3. It's started in the Mishnah. Hamotzi achai b'mitzvah. A person thinks it's a live person. So there's a halacha that you can't carry a live person on Shabbos. Midorabanan. But midoraisa, we have this concept that a live person, if you ever carry someone who's like asleep or awake, right? You carry a child who's asleep or awake. Which one's heavier? The sleeping one. Why? What's the difference? Same weight. No, there's a difference because a live person carries themselves. And so midoraisa, you are pater. You don't have to bring a carbon if you carried a live person, not only carrying them alone, but even in a bed. Afal you're even exempt for the bed. Why? The bed is an accessory to him. In other words, the bed is batal. It is we ignore the bed, meaning over here. What do I have over here? I have water. I don't have a glass and water. I have water, and therefore the glass becomes irrelevant. Similarly, hamotzi ochlan, person takes out food, pachos mikshir bechli, less than the amount. So you have to carry a certain amount on Shabbos b'chayv. But I take it a very small amount, but it's in utensil. The utensil is normal size, right? Pater afalakli. I'm also exempt from the utensil because the vessel is an accessory to it. So that's Rava's answer. Rava's answer is that the water is ownerless. The barrel has an owner, but we don't care about the fact that the barrel has an owner, because at the end of the day, the water is ownerless, and therefore that there's no limitation of tchum. Masav Yosef asked the question. Yehuda Omer, we have a brisa which says that Rabbi Yehuda says this halacha by carrying the barrel, bishayara. In the case of a caravan, that's where he says a caravan. You have a group of people who are stuck on Shabbos in some foreign place, some place without any food, whatever. There we have certain leniencies. We saw this earlier in Eruvin. So no zanadam. There's the fireworks again. No zanadam lechavero bishayara in shlo bishayara lo. He says it specifically by a caravan. So Elmer of Yosef says kitznan nam masnisan bishayara tznan. So Rav Yosef therefore wants to say our Mishnah is also talking about a caravan. Abai Amar says no. Bishayara. Abai gives another answer. Bishayara. If it's in a caravan, afilu chavish kanto shvisa umayim shkano shvisa, then the halacha is going to be the barrel, even if it's acquired a Shabbos residence, meaning it's owned by someone, and even if the water is owned by someone before Shabbos, and therefore it's normally limited. But with a caravan, we're going to be lenient and not have those limitations. Shelo bishayara. If it's not a caravan, then chavish kanto shvisa umayim shlo kano shvisa. There we're going to allow this in a case where the barrel acquired Shabbos residence, but the water did not acquire Shabbos residence. We're going to allow the person to go ahead and carry it beyond the tchum, because again the water did not acquire a residence, and the barrel is batal, is nullified, is unimportant compared to the water. Ravashi gives a last answer to last explanation for Rabbi Yehuda's ruling. Hacha bechavis to hefkar skinan. He says no, we're not talking about a barrel that's owned by anyone. Umayim to hefkar skinan, we're talking about ownerless pits. So man amrlo. So what's going on? Why would the Chacham disagree in that case? If there's no owner, then there's no limitations. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he is Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri to Amar Chevte Hefker Kohen Shvisa, who said that ownerless objects acquire Shabbos residence. Okay, so he has a very fascinating halacha. Normally we think that something that's owned by someone, that's where you have a limitation of tchum, but he says no, even something which is ownerless has the limitation of tchum. Ask the Gemara, what is the meaning of the Mishnah statement that says the barrel shall not go further than feet of its owner? It says very clearly owner. That's the Chacham's response. So the Gemara says, these, the water and barrel, shall not go further than the vessels that have owners. In other words, they're saying just like vessels that have owners are limited, so too this water is limited. prohibited. Okay, fine. Says the Mishnah, we have a Mishnah which we actually learned all the way in the beginning of Masechah Shabbos. A person's reading a book of scripture, reading Tanakh on a threshold. Again, keep in mind they had scrolls back then. And the book starts rolling out of the person's hand. Go, let's let the person let it roll it back to themselves. We're going to get into more detail. But basically, we're talking about, again, the book, a person's in the skupa. We're going to talk about what the status of the skupa is. The skupa is a threshold, kind of like outside of a house, not in the house, not in the public domain. And the book rolls out. It goes towards Rosh Hashanah. Person's allowed to roll it back to themselves, okay? Important principle, which we'll come back to, is that when it comes to being chayav midoraisa, I have to take an object from one domain and completely put it in another domain. Over here, I'm holding onto it and I'm rolling it back. It never really fully left one domain to go into the other domain. Keep that in mind. Rosh Hashanah, person's reading on a rooftop, which is the private domain, and it rolls into the public domain. So now we're in a private domain, going to a public domain. Actually, as long as it hasn't reached within 10 tefachim of the floor, what's the halacha? Rosh Hashanah does not go above 10 tefachim. Therefore, a person's allowed to roll it back themselves all the way. There's the fireworks again. When it reached within 10 tefachim, then you're not allowed to roll it up because now it's in the Rosh Hashanah. What you're allowed to do is you're allowed to turn it over. You're allowed to turn it over because it's disgraceful for people to walk by and say, oh, see, like there's a Tanakh laying out there. It's disrespectful. Yudah Omer, he disagrees. I feel it mislook man arts al kimlo machat go let. So he says no, it doesn't have to be above 10 tefachim. Even if it's just a hair's breadth right from beneath the floor, you're allowed to roll it back. We'll see why in the Gemara. Rav Shimon Omer, I feel about arts atzmo go let. So Rav Shimon says even more. Even if it's on the ground, you're still allowed to roll it back. Why? Because no law, which is rabbinic. This is a rabbinic law. At the end of the day, again, the object never left the person's hand fully, and therefore it's a rabbinic law. And we're not going to be more mach. We're not going to be cause stringency, which is going to cause us to be disgraceful towards a sefer. And therefore, Shimon says even if it's on the ground in the public domain, since it never fully left the person's hand, it's only a rabbinic law of not being able to pull it back. Therefore, we are going to be lenient and allow the person to roll it back entirely. Have a whatever you're learning this. Have a good whatever it is. All the best.